The art community has been known to be a place with an abundance of issues, whether that is the infamous art thieves or heated shipping discourses, then art controversies, or headcanon disagreements. But a very commonly overlooked problem within the community is the problem of racism. Whether it is artists using racial slurs against artists of color that they may disagree with, or redrawing people's dark-skinned OCs and claiming to have fixed them, it's undeniable that there is a growing problem in the community surrounding racism, colorism, and anti-black and POC rhetoric. Hi guys, gals, gays, and envays, it's Omnia, and today in this video I teamed up with two immaculate, splendid, and highly notable creators and artists of color that I really look up to help me revisit the topic of racism within the art community, the common problems we see within the community, and ways we can potentially combat it, those being Mohammed Agbadi and Chuuli. First, let's start off with Mohammed's segment, since I believe he did a really amazing job of introducing the topic and giving a broad summation of the problems commonly seen within the community. So I'll let Mohammed take it away.
Now, since before the birth of the annoying little Bluebird app and the other app that was made for sharing casual photography but now prioritizes every other form of media content except photography, and every other social media platform where individuals across the world can share their opinions on topics they may or may not be vaguely interested in, the artists, and other performing actors have used their skill or talent, for those who argue it exists, to voice their opinions, thoughts, and contributions on various topics impacting society one way or another. Artists have used their art to creatively challenge political issues in government, speak out against toxic societal norms, and express their feelings with various forms of abstract art and paintings. But you see, wherever there is freedom of speech and expression, there are always going to be those who push things too far, bending the rules to their favor and criticizing every single piece of art that has ever existed. Now, I don't have a problem with criticism, and I believe good, well thought out criticism can help everyone improve, see flaws in their art, and just keep the person grounded and their ego in check. Much like a teenager forced upstairs after spending a night out too long. I'm sure we all have one of those stories. But when people start using a person's race, skin color, or gender to form unnecessary points in their criticism, then it immediately becomes problematic, especially when they're insinuating that the art is not good because of the artist's race, or their opinions are not valid because of the artist's race, or that they should never attempt to pick up a pencil again because of the artist's race. It really bothers me how people use race and skin color to insult, harass, or just outrightly taunt artists on the internet, mocking them or their looks and features. Most of the time, these kinds of race-driven insults disguised as critiques stem from jealousy and just pure hatred, or maybe just ignorance and disregard of every other person's feelings, or just blatant racism. Websites like 4chan, lolcow, and Twitter are like meeting grounds for people who get a boner just taunting and harassing artists for being born not Caucasian. They thrive off insulting artists and manipulating their works to berate them, calling them all types of slurs, and just sending mean, hateful comments to their DMs. It pains me to say this, but this is a growing problem in the art community, not just on Twitter and other toxic websites, but just on the internet in general. And no matter how many times we call people like this out, making lengthy posts and videos with solid points explaining why behavior like this is toxic, it will still continue happening. These websites will still continue existing, and they will use videos like this to fuel their flame of pure hatred, racism, and endless toxicity. But that won't stop us from making videos to defend ourselves or other people who look like us. And as Steve Rogers will say,
I can do this all day.
And Steve Rogers is absolutely correct, because this isn't just any casual topic that can be discussed frivolously and without regard. Increased sensitivity and heightened awareness about your own position, where you might be contributing to racism, whether intentionally or unintentionally, or how you may be misunderstanding the concerns of Black, Indigenous, and artists of color within the community. This is why I thought it very relevant to include a much-needed clarification of what we're really talking about when we talk about racism in the art community. In this next clip, I wanted to distinguish the difference between racism and prejudice, whether or not people of color can be racist to white people, whether or not people of color can be racist to other people of color, and the ways racism can manifest into extremely detrimental, negative consequences within the real world and the everyday lives of marginalized identities. Let's get educated together. Roll the clip. Hi everyone, I just want to say first and foremost, you need to say hello to my son. I recently got him and I love him so much, so say hello to Sushi. Sushi aside, today in this clip we're going to have a language lesson part 2 about what I actually mean when I say racism. Let's have a really good base foundational understanding of what I mean when I say racism, and then distinguish it from prejudice, which is the thing that a lot of people tend to conflate when I refer to racism within the art community, or just racism in general. I also advise people who think they know the definition of racism or the way that it is different from prejudice to not skip this clip, because I can guarantee you, 1, that you will probably learn something, and 2, you might surprise yourself because maybe you don't actually know what racism is or what I mean when I say racist. Also, really quick disclaimer, I'm going to be looking to this side of my computer because I have 2 monitors and my notes are on one of the monitors, so I just don't want to mess up anything in this video, so I'm going to keep looking over there just to double check that I'm on track and that I'm making sense when I'm talking about this. Alright, let's just get right into the language lesson. So, when you search up racism on Google, this is what it says. Prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized. The belief that different races possess distinct characteristics, abilities, or qualities, especially so as to distinguish them as inferior or superior to one another. Okay? When you search up prejudice on Google, this is what it says. Preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. Give rise to prejudice in someone. Make biased. Also pretty straightforward. So I would say, in layman's terms, the difference between prejudice and racism is that prejudice is a preconceived idea about a particular group without any kind of real rhyme or reason, but it's just a biased opinion of somebody based on whatever it is. It might be hair type, it might be hair color, it could be anything, but it is just a preconceived idea about a group of people who have a characteristic. Whereas racism, on the other hand, involves an unequal distribution of power on the basis of race. And I would say the most important thing about that definition of racism is that there is power embedded in that definition, and using power is what makes something racist and what makes something not prejudice. Does that make any sense? Let's use a really quick, good example that would really easily illustrate the difference between what is prejudice and what is racist. For example, I see a white girl with blonde hair walking across the street, and I come up to her and say, "Girl, you must be dumb." Bruh. And she'll be like, "Excuse me? Why?" And I'll be like, "Because you're blonde." What is that? Answer, is it prejudice or racist? If you answered anything other than prejudice, you're wrong, and here's why. I'm a biracial black person. I just came up to her and said that based on her hair color, that I think she is dumb. There's no correlation. There's no real rhyme or reason as to why I think that, but it's a preconceived idea that I had about her because she has blonde hair. There's no power being exerted. There's no real world detriment that is happening to her. It is a very uncomfortable situation. It is a kind of shitty situation to be in. Why the fuck did I do that? But it's not racist. But if the roles were reversed and I'm walking across the street and this white woman comes up to me and says, or any racial slur, what is that? Is that prejudice or is that racist? The answer is racist, and you might be wondering why. The difference between those two examples is that the white woman is using a slur that is a reminder of the era of chattel slavery in America, and that is a very, very racially motivated thing to say to someone who is black. It is racist because she is a white woman who has the power to inflict real world damage onto a black person. And so that is racist. because it is someone from a powerful position inflicting real-world detriment onto someone who is marginalized or doesn't have that power. One thing I forgot to add, because for some reason I always be forgetting some shit in these videos. At this point in the video, I did mention how white people have the ability to oppress marginalized identities based on racial or ethnic group because they have the power and privilege to exert racism onto them. And so you may be wondering, okay, can other marginalized identities be racist to one another? And I would argue, yes, that is the case. That can happen. Really quick, overgeneralized example, but in a lot of cultures, such as Asian, Latin, Indigenous, Arab, Mediterranean cultures, is that there is some substantial amount of anti-Black rhetoric or colorism within those communities, even though they're all POC. And so in that way, I would argue that yes, other marginalized identities can be racist to one another. So it is more than prejudice because it couples that power and privilege. So really easy, if you haven't understood it so far, prejudice is just having a preconceived notion about someone in a particular group for no real rhyme or reason, whereas racist is prejudice plus power and privilege. You cannot be racist to someone if you do not have that power and privilege to be racist to them. So people from marginalized identities can't be racist to white people, but white people can be racist to anyone from a marginalized identity because they are the ones who possess the real world power to cause problems such as college admissions, redlining, police brutality, any other thing that you wanna, chalk it up to. Those are real world damages that occur to people who are POC or Black or Indigenous because based on their race or identity or ethnic group, they cannot get access to certain things because that is controlled through systemic racism. Hopefully that made sense. The easiest way to remember it is prejudice is a preconceived notion about a particular group. Racism is prejudice plus power and privilege. If you have any questions about this, leave them in the comment section down below and I'll try to answer them as well as I can. But that is what I mean when I say racism. I am talking about power. I am talking about privilege. I am not just saying prejudice. Okay? And I hope that helped with that distinction and helping you educate yourself a little bit more about the conversation that we're going to be having in the later half of this video. So thank you so much again, and I'll catch you in the rest of the video. Bye. Now that we have a common understanding about what I mean when I talk about racism within the art community, let's dive into some of the experiences and personal anecdotes from a multitude of different people, myself included. First, I think it most relevant to begin with the experiences of Twitter users, specifically Black artists online. Side note, if you would like to have your answers featured in any future videos, be sure to follow my Nia X Mini Twitter. I like to ask my audience their opinions on a lot of different things on there, so if you would like to be included, definitely shoot me a follow there. But for the sake of this video, I asked, calling all online Black artists, do you have any personal experiences with racism in the art community? If so, how/what happened? If not, do you think there is a large amount of racism in the art community, or does it just appear in fringe groups for research purposes? Here is what some of you said. Black Geeky Girl said, as a Black artist, I have been called racist, fascist, Trump, etc., attacked for blackwashing, believing to hate white people, and even been sent death threats/racial threats on numerous occasions, all because of my Black edits of their favorite characters. Sukasa Enthusiast said, I've had my OCs who have textured hair be made fun of/mocked for their hair texture. This isn't something that's ever happened to my non-Black OCs. The Ultimate Cringe Lord said, thankfully, I've never experienced that myself, but racism in the art community is a major issue. The amount of times I've seen racist depictions of minority is wild. Hell, even if you give constructive criticism, artists will just straight up not give a shit. DZ said, I, thankfully, have no personal experiences with racism towards me online, but I've seen how racist the art community is. It's a really hostile environment for Black artists, and it's the main reason I'm so hesitant on drawing Black characters because I don't want to get harassed. Skybirth said, thankfully, nothing personal, but I have seen people be harassed and called slurs and mocked for drawing Black people or characters in their own interpretation. That has made it hard for me to want to post my own art anywhere. The Great Berg said, yes, however, most people tend to leave me alone, but when I do, it's ugly. And because I draw characters from different ethnic backgrounds, I also see racism there. For example, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and xenophobia. I even dealt with homophobia with one calling me the N slur and the F slur. Those were just some of the responses I decided to feature. If you would like to see more or add your own responses, go check out my Twitter account. But all this to say, I think it's safe to conclude that even for Black artists who don't directly experience racism in the art community, they have seen a good amount of it around them, and it has caused them to feel dissuaded from posting their own art online. For Black artists who have directly experienced it, I can't imagine it being an enjoyable experience and has probably left them feeling really gutted about their diverse OCs being mocked and ridiculed in such a way. It was really disappointing for me to read these responses, and I hope these behaviors can be decreased in the art community, since I believe we should celebrate diversity and allow others to create the art they love and cherish as long as it isn't hurting anyone. Now that we've read some of the responses from Black artists online, let's hear from an Indigenous artist online, that being my good friend, Chuuli. I called on her today to ask about any of her own experiences with racism within the art community, and here's what she had to say.
Hey, want to talk about racism in the art community? Let's talk about racism in the art community. So I've been called here today to speak on this subject, and while I may not be the B in BIPOC, I am the I. That was stupid. And though I'd love to be able to be free of the art community, it's simply too large to escape, and so is the racism within. I'm also the reason this video is being released like an entire week late, so you're welcome for that. So I think something that I should preface this with is that racism is not a constant monolithic force across the board. And in particular, I noticed that bigotry against Indigenous Americans, especially in the creative world, usually revolves around exploiting the weathered state of many First Nation cultures to misrepresent them and pretend that misrepresentation isn't damaging. So in effect,
colonization.
Personally, a very notable anecdote of racism that I experienced firsthand was about a couple years ago when my old social circle was way more open than it is now. Don't worry, I've grown smarter since. But this was back when I talked to and interacted with a lot of art community people out of obligation. Big mistake. And one night, the discussion of cultural appropriation was going on, specifically of a northeastern Native American creature that's been bastardized and misrepresented a lot in popular media. And we're talking so misrepresented and divorced from the source material that people don't even know that the name belongs to an actual belief in Indigenous cultures in northeastern North America. I won't say the name because speaking it is considered taboo, but if you're wondering, it was depicted pretty accurately in the game Until Dawn. So this discussion is happening, and a large white creator basically took it upon themselves to barge into the conversation surrounding this Indigenous American mythos to say that all cultural figures are fair game, and misrepresenting colonized and diminished cultures isn't that bad because, well, what about the European cultures spread around the world? What about them, honey? The cultures that were forced upon the First Nations peoples? Those ones? Always have to make it about themselves, I swear. And not only that, but I guess they were so upset at the reasoning I gave to be respectful of cultures and how they're more fragile due to colonization, that the next day they posted an entire mini-comic about how unfair it is to white creators that people have a problem when Indigenous American folklore is misrepresented, just straight up ignoring everything I explained to them the night prior. Now, they were already going the extra mile to just be racist, but what really had me like, damn, a lot of white people in this community just don't get it, is when a lot of other white creators started chiming in as well with complaints of, oh, I guess we just can't enjoy anything now. All, reminder, in response to criticisms from Indigenous Americans having their cultures misrepresented for white artist consumption. Oh, poor white people. Can't exploit non-white culture with culturally inaccurate OCs. Like, I don't know, do the research on what you're dealing with, or better yet, make something of your own. Isn't that what you tell BIPOC artists to do whenever they race bend a popular white character to look more like themselves? Oh. Tea. You want to know the best part? I can't even just be mad at white racists in the art community, because part of the reason why that initial creator felt so vindicated and justified in their feelings is because they were using their
third-gen Native American friend
as a warrior against all criticism of misrepresentations of Indigenous cultures who, get this, their only point was that there were actually more Indigenous cultures being misrepresented by the inaccurate depiction of the creature. God damn it. So I understand this might be a bit spicy of me to say, but POC covering for the racist actions of their white colleagues and friends is also a problem, and is certainly not the look. I think sometimes we forget that POC aren't exempt from discriminating against or reinforcing racism against their own communities, and I know in particular that a lot of the Black community knows this very well. And I know that it's not our fault that these racist ideas got planted into every one of us, and some of us just never got out of it. Internalization is a bitch like that, but that doesn't excuse the harm caused by not looking inward. And believe me, I know what internalization does to a motherfucker. Without getting too deep, there's a reason why my online persona looked like this until pretty recently. And I'm not saying that we have to answer for the potential racist actions that our white colleagues may or may not do. No. Although I have pointed out actions that I deemed racist of some of my white friends, and they did stop the behavior and renounce it. But that's not the point. The point is, actively taking on the role of a token minority friend to bat for white friends' racist actions is just... it's not it. I know that we would like to think better of our friends and think that they would never slip up, but none of us are sacred. Even you. But, as a wise Kajijam boy once said, remember, you can always change your mind. That's gonna be all from me. Thank you so much to Nia for letting me on the channel for this. Love you. Bye.
I really appreciate Chuuli's contribution to this video. Her experiences are really insightful and also underscore the really important fact that BIPOC can also indirectly and directly contribute to and exacerbate racism within the art community. Go drop a follow to each of these creators as a token of my appreciation for their contributions. They did wonderfully. As for my own experiences with racism within the art community, I can't say I had any shortage of problems myself. One scroll through my DMs and yeah, this speaks for itself. I think for me personally, I've become a lot more equipped to handle things like this because I've managed to develop a pretty thick skin throughout my time on YouTube. I'm not saying that that's really a good thing or something I should have had to go through, but it is something that has happened to me over time. A lot of less than savory occurrences have happened within my time in the art commentary scene, and so racist vitriol like this doesn't really penetrate me the way it used to at the beginning of my time being a public artist of color creator on YouTube. Stuff like this happens all the time for artists who are public about being POC and make their opinions known online. If we learned anything from Thuman's situation, these people are really emboldened by videos like this, using our commentary as an excuse to be even more racist and more harmful to artists of color within the community. In turn, that leads me to the question this video started off with. Is the art community racist? My personal answer to that question is inherently, I don't know. But what I do know is that there is quite a bit of it, and we need to recognize the pitfalls many artists fall into when engaging in race-related topics. Whether it is Thuman's situation regarding her Kiki's delivery service drawing, or the Nessa controversy, Zfix's art, or the Black Peach fiasco, I have to say, my short time in the online art community has been riddled with a lot of questionable, very concerning dramas that have arose around the topic of race, especially regarding Black artists. I was considering making a series just talking about the racist situations that have been prominent in the art community, since I feel like that is an important topic that needs to be highlighted more frequently, but you can all let me know if that's something you'd genuinely be interested in. I guess I'll conclude this video with my own thoughts regarding racism in the art community. I believe it needs to be stopped, or at least significantly decreased. It pains me to see people enter this community with the hope of sharing their creativity and love for diverse characters with other artists, only to be shunned or ridiculed. I don't think that should be what the art community is known for, and online, there are so many different people you can meet from so many different racial and ethnic backgrounds. I've met people who have ancestors that speak languages that are currently going extinct, people who are from tribes and cultures so unlike my own or the ones I grew up in. There is so much beauty and richness I feel like we can learn from one another if we each individually made ourselves open to it. I don't know why a certain vocal minority of people wish to spread hate and racist vitriol to those I feel like we can learn from and appreciate so much more from. But I hope after watching this video, you can consider where you stand, how you might be contributing to this growing problem, and the ways you can fix it in your own little corner of the internet. Until next time, that's all from me. Thank you, as always, to all of my wonderful patrons, with a special thank you to my very cherished newcomer, Corrupted Hugh. As for all 16 of my patrons, your support is always considered extremely helpful in allowing me to put these videos out at the pace that I do, so thank you so very much again. If you would like to support me on Patreon, the link is in the description below. As little as $2 a month really helps me out, so please do consider signing up. Last but not least, a very special thank you goes out to WST Audrey on Twitter for this very adorable drawing of me and Thuman together. Let me know what you think about racism within the art community in the comment section down below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I'll catch y'all next time. Bye!
Mm.